on how you can captivate the audience in the first 10 to 20 seconds of your speech. And before I give the speech tip for today, which is probably the most powerful speech tip you can use for captivating the audience attention, I'm going to review the tips that I gave you before. And to help you remember this, I had an acronym, right? It was VHP RPSS. And if you have trouble remembering the acronym, think of the phrase very horrified people running past slimy snakes. Right? So then you can remember the tips. The V stood for a visual. Hold a visual up that is related to your speech. The H stands for humor. Have some humor at the beginning of your speech to connect with the audience. The P stood for take a poll of the audience. And then the R is ask a rhetorical question. The P was make a promise. The S is to make a startling statement or state some startling statistics. And the other S was to create suspense. Now, the tip for today also starts with an S. So now we have 3 S. This tip, one of the most powerful tips that you can use to captivate the audience attention right away, is to tell a short personal story. Use an anecdote that had a lesson learned or a moral that is related to your speech. Once you get into the storytelling mode, you've got the audience attention. Also, when you tell a story, you could combine many of the things that we have in the other tips. You could add humor in your story, you could create suspense in your story, you could maybe even take a poll in your story after you tell the story, or you could state something that may ask a question that for the audience to think about. So think of some stories that happened to you, something that you remember in your childhood, that you learned a lesson from, that you could never forget because it taught you something that you'll never forget. Keep a collection of these stories, and you will always have some resources that will be related to a topic that you're going to talk about. So in my next series of tips, I'm going to give you some tips on how to construct a story that will do all of what I talked to you about. And I'll give you some examples to illustrate this. So prepare for the next tip. Let's test it.
Great.